So hear me out. I know that the NHL has made their quarter century top two teams or lines or whatever you want to call them. And for all intents and purposes, it's the top 12 players of any particular team. Top two lines, top two goaltenders. Well, Kyle Richardson of the Hockey News put out an article where he listed the Mount Rushmore of every NHL team. Some teams had a very short list because, Utah's only been around for one season. But when you take a look at it, right, and you think about it, how would Montreal's Mount Rushmore look? I think it's worth discussing. So let's talk. Hey, gang. Kosta here from Puck Talk Montreal. And, it's a heady discussion, right? Anytime you try to take a look at a list or a Mount Rushmore or whatever it is, there's always going to be variances, and everybody's opinion matters. But in some cases, when people say their particular Mount Rushmores and they put in their input and try to, offset one player for another, there's a lot that hasn't been discussed when it comes to that. And those are things I'm going to look at here. I'm not going to give you my Mount Rushmore until maybe the very end of the show. But I am going to discuss the other people's Mount Rushmores. And I'm also going to discuss the yay or nay for every player. And I'm going to start by giving you the NHL's quarter century team. Because after all, there's 12 players on this list that could very well be part of the Mount Rushmore. The NHL's first team for the Montreal Canadiens quarter century team would be Saku Koivu, Alex Kovalev, Thomas Plekanec, Andrei Markov, Shea Weber, and Carey Price. Now, I don't have a problem with anybody on that list with the exception of maybe Shea Weber. Now, Shea Weber, of course, Hall of Fame worthy defenseman in my opinion, no questions asked. But is he Mount Rushmore material? Is he, among the pantheon of Canadiens players in the last 25 years? Let's preface that by saying 237 players donned the Bleu-Blanc-Rouge in the last 25 years, plus another 28 goaltenders. So there's a lot to choose from. So to just outright say that Shea Weber should be on your first team as a defenseman, you could say that based on his entire career, but his entire career wasn't all in Montreal. Part of it was in Nashville. So to put him on Montreal's first team, I don't know. Second team, sure. Then to take a look at the second team, you've got Brendan Gallagher, Max Pacioretty, Nick Suzuki, Sheldon Surrey, P.K. Subban, and Jose Theodore. All solid picks. No argument to be had as far as anybody there, with the exception maybe of Sheldon Surrey. Because to me, Sheldon Surrey was a bit more of a one-trick pony. Big defenseman, great on the power play, had his holes on defense, wasn't so reliable in the defensive zone, but had a mean streak. But I wouldn't have put him on my quarter century team. There are others I might have put there. But it is what it is. Now, there's one person on both those lists and among the 65 different people that wore the Canadiens jersey, and I'd be remiss if I got my numbers wrong. But there's one person that absolutely has to be there without a shadow of a doubt, and that is Carey Price. Carey Price, from the time he joined the Canadiens in 2007, I know that number is wrong, but hey, it is what it is, until he ended his career in 2022, he was the prototype, for the most part, of what a goaltender should look like. A hybrid. Stand up when you have to, go down in the butterfly when you have to. Be able to move laterally, have a good glove, good blocker, be technically sound, track the puck well. That's your prototypical goaltender. And that's what Carey Price was. There's no argument to be had as far as Carey Price and his numbers, right? I believe he appeared in 719 games, had 49 shutouts, a .258 career goals against average, and a .917 career save percentage. Those are great numbers for a goaltender who a lot of times played on teams that were really crappy. Didn't always have the best players in front of him during his career. But for a lot of people, yours truly included, for the better part of a decade, Carey Price was not only considered to be the best goaltender on the Montreal Canadiens, but amongst the best goaltenders in the world. And there's a lot to be said there, right? Of course, as he got older, as his knees started to fail him, other goaltenders took those spots away. We're talking about guys like Andrei Vasilevsky, UC Saros, Sergei Bobrovsky. The list goes on and on. But by and large, Carey Price obviously is going to be on my Mount Rushmore. We're not going to argue that point, and he should be on yours as well, no matter what you might think of him. Now, the next player I'm going to look at is Saku Koivu. And this is where the discussion becomes kind of interesting. Lyle Richardson's co-worker, Karine Haynes, claims that Saku Koivu should not be on that list and should be replaced with somebody else, who is also part of my possible list. Now, here's the thing about Saku Koivu. Yes, when he first came into the league, in his second season, he suffered a knee injury when he was the leading scorer of the National Hockey League. We know that that kind of changed the direction of his career a little bit. It is what it is, right, when it comes to injuries. In the, I believe it was 2005 playoffs, he took a stick to the eye from Justin Williams, effectively knocking him out of the series against the Carolina Hurricanes. Sorry, that wasn't 2005, that was 2003. And what did it do? It cost the Canadiens a spot in the Stanley Cup final, in my opinion. But then there's the bigger battle, the one that everybody remembers Saku Koivu for, and that is his battle against cancer. Keep in mind, when you look at Koivu's numbers, he played 502 games, had 418 points, and missed a season and a half between 2000 and 2002 because of cancer. I've never been through cancer, and I'm not going to profess to say that it's easy or hard or how painful it can be, but I know people who have been. I've had loved ones that I've lost to cancer. And the thing about cancer is it's debilitating. Even when you're in chemotherapy and you're trying to come back, it saps your strength. So for any player to be able to come back at the level he did and perform at the top of his game until he left the Canadiens in 2009, there's a reason why that man wore a C on his jersey. Not because he was just a captain, not because he led by example, but he exemplifies the word courage. So let's just say that Saku Koivu is right up there as far as the people I think should be on the Mount Rushmore. People who don't think that are oblivious to his history, and also oblivious to the fact that during a lot of his career in Montreal, including after he started out, I think it was in 96, after Patrik left and Vinny Danfus got traded to the San Jose Sharks, that the team really started to flounder offensively. You know, you had the likes of Martin Ruchinski, who would score a few goals here and there. Jan Bulis was another one that was on the team. Richard Zednik. The offense wasn't quite where it was back in the early 90s. And Koivu suffered for it. In the 2000s, it was not much better. So, you know, you got to understand that he was a catalyst. He created offense. He also finished quite often. So to say that Saku Koivu shouldn't be there is a little dismissive if you're basing it solely on numbers, because that's quite unfair given his character. Now, next up on our list of possibles is Brendan Gallagher. Gallagher, of course, still playing with the Montreal Canadiens, but eligible nonetheless, right? He did start with the team in 2012, and, you know, 464 points in 634 games. Or is that 834 games? It's 834 games. Not too shabby for a fifth or sixth round pick, right? From out of the Vancouver Giants. And here's the thing about Gallagher. Gallagher is one of those guys that plays with his heart on his sleeve. He's a hard-nosed player, goes to the front of the net, pushes people around to get position, gets in the goaltender's face, creates space for his line mates. And you look at him, right? He scored over 20 goals 5 times in his career. 2014, he had 24. He had 31 in 2017, 2018, 2019, 33. And then last season, a season that everybody thought Gallagher's career is over, he scored 21. None too shabby for a 33-year-old sixth-round pick, let me tell you. And the thing about Gallagher, it's not so much his numbers that lead the Montreal Canadiens and put him in that upper echelon or elite category of players that have worn the Canadiens jersey. It's his character. It's his laissez-faire attitude towards the game, where he puts caution to the wind and puts his head down and gets into the dirty areas and takes shots and, you know, gets all kinds of physical disrespect, for lack of a better term. And those kind of players that lead by that kind of example are hard to find. He's got character. He's got grit. He's got finish. And he's got leadership. Those are all qualities you look at a person that you're going to put on your Mount Rushmore. Because after all, if you take a look at the Montreal Canadiens Mount Rushmore all time, who do you think of? You think of Maurice Richard, Jean Beliveau. You think of Guy Lafleur. And you think of, you could put Jacques Plante there, you could put Ken Dryden. Depends on your taste, right? But you understand what I'm getting at. Every one of those guys led by example and performed on the ice. And that's kind of what you're looking at. Brendan Gallagher led by example and did perform when called upon, scoring some big goals in big situations for the Canadiens. So that puts him in the conversation. Next up, the captain, Nick Suzuki, of the current edition of the Montreal Canadiens. Yes, has only been in the league for 6 years, but given his track record and his point production, he's got to be in the conversation for the Mount Rushmore of the last 25 years. 375 points in 455 games. Add 25 points in 37 playoff games. Really good for Nick Suzuki. But here's the thing. Nick Suzuki was the player that Karine Haynes wanted to put on the Mount Rushmore instead of Saku Koivu. Saku Koivu is the second longest tenured captain in Canadiens history. When Nick Suzuki's contract is done, he will have surpassed Saku Koivu in that respect. But right now, Koivu's got that on him. The other thing is, when you take a look at Suzuki and the numbers he's putting up, there's no doubt that he is a playmaker. He generates offense. He's good in his own zone. He's a 200-foot player. No argument to be had. The thing about Suzuki, though, is that he is together with players of similar caliber and quality. When you take a look at Saku Koivu, that wasn't always the case with him. So, you got to balance that out a little bit, right? When you think about it. I could be wrong, and you could put it in the comments, but in my opinion, Nick Suzuki in 2050 will be on this list, bar none, as far as the Mount Rushmore of the next 25 years. But right now, we'll see. I still haven't told you what my list looks like, but that's my argument when it comes to Koivu. Koivu, more years under his belt in the last 25 than Suzuki, less talent surrounding him than Suzuki. Now, one of the talents that did surround Saku Koivu and was around for a limited period of time was Alex Kovalev. Now, I don't understand why in the whole discussion about the best players in the last 25 years, Kovalev's not there, if they're basing it on numbers, because he had 264 points in 314 games with the Canadiens. It's nothing to scoff at. Playoffs, 31 points in 33 games. So really, why would he not be there? Because the production is there. Well, one of the reasons why people often leave Alex Kovalev off their list is because of the fact that he would turn the switch on and off whenever he felt like it. There was no real urgency to be any, really superstar player. He earned his money over his career. He produced. There's no question of that. But the lack of actual give a damn and character when it came to his team as opposed to the individual is what really sours people on Kovalev. There's no question that Alex Kovalev could stick handle on the phone booth, and on the right wing, when he would make one stride and cut to the middle and shoot, it was one of the most deadliest moves, despite it being simple in nature, that an NHL player could pull. Not to mention, toe drag in and out, backhand pass, it's all Kovalev, right? So he's part of the discussion. Will he be on that list? Is he on your Mount Rushmore? That's the bigger question. Now, here's a name that a lot of people don't talk about. He's on the quarter century team, but when it comes to Mount Rushmore, one guy that never gets the respect that he deserves is Thomas Plekanec. Plekanec is the player, oh my God, I can't type for shit, can I? Is the player that got the most time with the Montreal Canadiens during the last 25 years, from 2003 to 2019. A total of 16 years out of 25. That alone should put him on the quarter century team. I mean, There's no, because he was almost here a quarter century. But the thing about Thomas Plekanec, a lot of it is what really hampered Saku Koivu, in the sense that he was never with, players that were of the same ilk. Thomas Plekanec was the ultimate centerman for the Montreal Canadiens. He may not have been a number one on most teams in the National Hockey League, because most teams class their number one player based on their output, which is what we used to call David Desharnais for a certain period of time. Remember that guy? Well, Plekanec, being the second line center, would not only be on the power play, but he would also kill penalties. He was one of the best face-off takers in the National Hockey League, and he was very effective at what he did, whether it was killing penalties, generating offense on the power play, or being good at 5-on-5. All around, good player. I had the privilege of interviewing him once when I was working for CBC Radio, and a gentleman on the mic as well, very kind, laughed at my jokes despite the fact that they were stupid. But overall, there's no question that Thomas Plekanec deserves to be part of the discussion. And when you take a look at his numbers, when it's all said and done, 606 points in just under 1,000 games, 984, and playoffs, 49 points in 87 games. Again, good numbers for a guy that didn't play with very talented offensive players. So there's no way you should not put Plekanec on this list, right? Or put him into consideration for this list. Next up, the guy we all love to hate. Boy, I never changed the date on any of these graphics. Max Pacioretty with the Canadiens from 2008 to 2018. Pacioretty, who was a perennial 30-goal scorer, scored 30 goals or more in 6 seasons with the Montreal Canadiens. He had 448 points at 626 NHL games with Montreal. But his biggest problem, and one that we talked about more often than not, was his lack of production in the playoffs. He only showed up, despite the fact he played for the Canadiens for almost 10 years, he only played 38 playoff games. And in those 38 playoff games, 19 points. It's not enough, right, for somebody that's supposed to be among your best players. So to say that he was a playoff performer, not a chance. Regular season, definitely somebody that anybody would want on their team when he was in his prime early on in his career. Now, he's been resorted to PTOs and stuff like that, and it's a shame to see him go down like that. But Max Pacioretty, for the 10-year stretch that he was with the Montreal Canadiens, was considered one of the best snipers in the National Hockey League. So if he was, then why wouldn't you take a guy who was on your team for 10 years and was your leading goal scorer for 6 or 7 of those? Why wouldn't you want to put him on your Mount Rushmore? Playoff performance, he's not there at all. But based on the regular season, I would put him there. And keep in mind, this is a guy who got absolutely obliterated by Zdeno Chara, right? You remember that? Where he was drooling on the ice when he was knocked out? We all do. We all thought he was dead. People calling 911 to get Chara arrested. A little ridiculous, but hey, it's a stanchion. He ended up changing the way that the glass was in the NHL because of that hit. So let's just call it what it is, okay? Max Pacioretty should be part of the conversation. Now we get to a couple of defensemen. One of them, Andrei Markov, played for the Canadiens from 2000 to 2017. The thing about Markov that pisses me off the most is that he played 990 games with the Canadiens, and Marc Bergevin refused to give him a contract so he can play out his 1,000 games. For somebody as well-respected on the blue line as Andrei Markov, it was a Bush League move. Take a look at Markov's numbers. 572 points in 990 games in the regular season, 32 points in 84. Sorry, is that 84 or 64? 89 playoff games. I had it right. So you take a look at that and you say to yourself, Andrei Markov, he was the power play wizard from the blue line. He was able to generate offense, the master of the backdoor play where he would get a pass at the side of the net, put the puck in. He was good in his own zone. And he's another guy who, comparable to Kirby Dach, went through 2 knee injuries, right, in almost succession. Not quite as tight as Kirby Dach, but still quite close. But he managed to come back from that. Why? Patience. Why? Strength. Why? Conviction. We're hoping that Kirby Dach has all those things. But the thing about Markov is, for a long time he was considered one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League, despite the fact that when he played junior, that's where he got converted over to defense, because before that he was a forward, which is why everybody used him, in the shootout, because he had a good backhand. Not something that a defenseman normally has, but Markov's was lethal, and he scored more than he didn't when he took shootout chances. So, Andrei Markov on my Mount Rushmore? Possibly. And then there comes another character who is a bit of a wild card here, and that's PK Subban. Talent-based, production-based, there is no doubt that PK Subban could get asses out of the seats, take your breath away. You could just ask Brad Marchand about that, and he could just elevate his game when you needed to. Don't we all remember the breakaway goal coming out of the penalty box, the move he made on Tuukka Rask? Do we not remember that hit where he hit Brad Marchand with his ass and Marchand had to go to the bench to try to find his wind again? And the big booming shot from the blue line on one-timers when he was fed by Markov. Those are the things we remember about PK Subban on the ice. And then off the ice, we love him for what he did with the Montreal Children's Hospital and for the donation he made there. But there were a lot of stories going around the city of Montreal about PK Subban. They might be substantiated, they might not be, but at the end of the day, that kind of destroyed his career more than anything else here in Montreal. That and the fact that Marc Bergevin didn't like how he got played when it came to the bridge deal. No fault of Subban's and his team. Bergevin wanted to nickel and dime Subban. Subban wanted term. Bergevin finally wanted term. Now Subban wanted money. So that's how he got his $9 million 8-year deal. And what did they decide to do? Well, they decided to get rid of him. Why? Because Marc Bergevin is a general manager who just doesn't garner any respect. And you know what? To be honest, I think they did Subban a favor because he went to New Jersey and he played very well there along with Nashville. And the thing about Subban is Michel Therrien just didn't like him. And so for as long as Michel Therrien and Marc Bergevin would be in charge of the Montreal Canadiens, Subban wouldn't have gotten a fair shake. So they kind of did him a favor getting rid of him. But overall, you take a look at Subban's body of work with the Montreal Canadiens. Does he deserve to be on the Mount Rushmore? Yes and no. Production-wise, excitement-wise, thrill-wise, triple low 5-wise, absolutely. But who other than him deserves to be there? And that's where we are. All those players that I discussed, Price, Koivu, Gallagher, Suzuki, Kovalev, Plekanec, Pacioretty, Markov, and Subban. That's the group of players that I'm looking at for my Mount Rushmore of the Montreal Canadiens. How does mine lay out? Well, obviously, the number one guy on my Mount Rushmore, Carey Price. The second guy, I think it's going to be obvious to everybody as well, that would be Saku Koivu. The third obvious choice for me is Andrei Markov. There's no question that Markov is on my Mount Rushmore for the Montreal Canadiens in the last 25 years. And my fourth, you're going to be surprised at who I pick. My fourth is Thomas Plekanec. Why? For the reasons that I outlined. Solid 200-foot player, a player that could be counted out defensively and offensively in any given situation, whether you're killing a penalty or you're on the power play, and you knew he would win more faceoffs than he lost. I can't remember, but there was one season where he was hovering around 60% in the faceoff dot. So how can you not take a guy who produced points, killed penalties, played an overall great game, made the players around him better, won faceoffs at both ends of the rink? How do you not put that guy on your Mount Rushmore ahead of a PK Subban or ahead of a Pacioretty or Gallagher? I put Thomas Plekanec there. He is my number 4. Richardson's was Price, Koivu, Markov, and Subban. Solid picks on his end as well. Almost the same as mine, with the exception of Plekanec and Subban. We flip-flopped those. But I'd like to see who you think your top 4 players in the last 25 years were for the Montreal Canadiens. Do you not want to put Price on your list? Would you rather put somebody else? The lists can vary. You're not obliged to have a goaltender, folks. I put Carey Price there because as a goalie myself, or a former goalie, I've played every position on the ice. But as a guy who understands the position and appreciates how it's being played, I thought Price was a cut above the rest. Koivu, there's no arguing the courage, the leadership, the production, everything that Saku Koivu brought to the table. And Andrei Markov, I think a lot of us still wish Andrei Markov was still playing for the Montreal Canadiens right now. Obviously, they're getting the defense together, but it would have been nice to have him around for the last couple of years, wouldn't it? That's where we are. And then, of course, Thomas Plekanec, who, why haven't the Canadiens called this guy to come in and consult as a center? Beats me, but might be something to look at too, right? A little bit of thought for all of you. See you next time.